Chapter 2. The Moment in the Mirror. So, by now you know what the kindergarten mentality is, and that I may or may not have someone else in the room telling me these jokes are funny. But you picked up this book for some substance, and right now is when I deliver. Here's where my serious side shines. Let's go. I love turtles. Oops. Try again. That's what she said. I made that up in the 7th grade, way before anyone heard it on The Office. Come on, Neil. Be serious, please. Okay, here goes. Sammy Sosa should be in the Hall of Fame. Shit, Neil. What? You asked me to be serious. Steroids or no steroids, Sammy Sosa is a Hall of Famer in my book. But I reserve the right to change my mind at any point during my lifetime. Okay. Let's talk about my story. Admit it, you don't know shit. That's what I heard at one point during what I now call the moment in the mirror, which lasted many hours one evening in November of 2017. The moment actually lasted a few days. I just didn't stay in front of the mirror the whole time. I've called it a fall apart. I've called it a breakthrough. And now I call it an awakening. Because this experience changed the way I perceive the entire world, and how I'll live my life forever. This experience of falling apart gave me perspective about how I was living, the stories I was telling myself to make that life possible, and how I could remain so miserable. It opened my eyes and my heart, allowing me to know that there is more at work in this life experience that I can see. The universe shared it through me, and now I get to share it with you. I had the water running to take a shower one evening after work. It was a little over a year after the last alcohol detox of many I had gone through in October 2016. Detoxing from alcohol is defined as the natural process that occurs in the body as it attempts to rid the system of waste products. But it can be extremely life-threatening, so I chose to do it in the hospital, where they're always ready for an emergency. At the end of that detox, the doctors and nurses told me that if I didn't stop drinking for good, the condition of my internal organs would not survive another detox, and had even gone as far as to give me a 2 weeks to live prognosis. That day, I had left the hospital in pure terror, sort of expecting that I was just going home and waiting to die in a couple weeks, but there was still a big part of me that didn't believe them. After over a year went by, I realized that I was still here, so I decided to take a shower to celebrate. Wait, that's not how it happened. Where's the delete button? Maybe backspace? No. Never mind. I'm doing this with 0 edits. I was taking a shower, that's true. But it wasn't to celebrate, nope. It was part of a daily routine I have that includes taking a shower and brushing my teeth. I call it hygiene. As I was walking naked, told you, across the hall, into the bathroom where the shower was running, I was stopped in my tracks by what I saw in the full-length mirror. Me. All 225 plus pounds of fat and flubby me. Making flubby a word too. But it was kind of difficult to see my penis, so maybe I didn't see all 225 plus pounds. The defeated body that I saw was enough to stop me in the mirror, but what kept me there was something more important than that. It was how I felt on the inside. I stood there and stared. Then I sat and stared. I'm not sure for how long exactly, but I stared hard at myself for a long while. I stared so hard I could see my feelings. There was so much hate, distrust, abandonment, aloneness, with the heaviest feeling being the sense of not deserving to be alive, like my whole life had been a mistake, all hidden under my chosen distractions and addictions. I couldn't look away, even though it felt like I didn't know who or what I was looking at anymore. I started asking myself questions like, why do I feel so shitty all the time? What kind of example am I setting for my son? How could we do this ourselves? Why do I feel like I hate myself so much? Then, my questions started answering themselves with tears. I stood there, crying for the person that I saw looking back at me. I started talking in we, and it made sense. I was experiencing compassion in a way I had never experienced before. And it was for the self I had been treating so poorly. I sat there naked with no desire to beat myself up anymore. I had no desire to continue with the excuses I used my entire life. I had no desire to do anything but sit there, cry, and love that dude in the mirror. He needed it. I needed it. I was looking at him like it wasn't me, but it was. I was looking at him like we were an us. Seeing myself cry made me cry even harder and release more of the heavy energy of the story I had been carrying around for so many years. That's how it seemed to work. I was in this together with myself. I always had been, and always will be, but seem to have lost communication and accountability. I apologized. Then I forgave him. And then I forgave him 1,000 more times. I apologized to and forgave everyone that showed up in my mind in that moment. He let me. I let myself. I let him. Nothing made sense, but I understood everything. And it was perfect. I put pants on and cried for a couple of hours more. Don't worry, climate activists, I was also present enough to turn off the shower if I wasn't going to use it. The tears continued to flow like the shower I had just turned off. Almost like I hadn't turned it off at all. Where do I get this stuff? Everything that was holding me together was falling apart, and I was happy to let it. I had zero desire to be strong, as I knew it. I didn't want to be my creation anymore. I wanted to be un-me, and I didn't know where to start. Good thing we live in the universe, or I might have been lost. I felt that I had lived so much of my life on my own, and I was crying at the results. I say on my own because that's what I believed. I had a terrible time asking anyone for help beyond surface-level stuff. I was probably blind to most of the real help that was in front of me when it was in front of me, because I had been too far in the future, always worried about not having enough. Just about everything we need is always in front of us if we're willing to stay present and find what we need in the moment, which most of the time is nothing. We're never alone. That's just how the universe works. As this book progresses, you too may agree that we're never alone. And no, I'm not talking about the Illuminati. There is a difference between awakening and being woke. I just explained it. You're welcome to look it up too. There's probably lots of articles on the subject. In that hours-long moment in front of the mirror, I was releasing so many of the victim stories I had been telling myself for so long. We unconsciously hold on to our stories just to keep the identity and delusion of who we think we are. I was even releasing some of the know-it-allism that resided in me, though I do still carry some of it because it works so amazing for me when I tell jokes. Maybe I can rename it sarcasticism, and release the full effect of know-it-allism. Very noticeable for me was the release of my unwillingness to change. I saw why it was so difficult to change anything I wanted to change, and the desire to keep protecting my old story began to fade. I did everything for something we know as reasons. We all do. Only I didn't know where the reasons were coming from yet, or that they are mostly bullshit. It's all part of our unique programs that we call our stories, which will be explained throughout this book. The core of the story I told myself went something like this. I grew up with alcoholic parents. My dad wasn't around because he was out partying, and my mom used to beat the shit out of me because she hated me and my dad. And, in the 80s, when child abuse was brought to awareness as something that was no longer acceptable in American households, I used my story to gain pity, feel ashamed of who I thought I was, and excuse any shitty mood I was in or the way I treated someone. I lived as the victim in that story for as long as my body would let me, because I would never allow myself to feel compassion for being a victim of child abuse. Feeling compassion for the victim inside would have meant that I would have transcended that story, and the bullshit machine wasn't having that. I became the stories I told myself, guided unconsciously by the bullshit machine. I carried around the identity of an abused child with alcoholic parents and the poor kid with something to prove, and used it as anger towards my life. I did it with a full resentment chip on my shoulder, because I believed that life threw me a curveball, and I needed to fight my way out. And then continued to tell these stories almost 20 years after my parents had passed. For years, I cried how I grew up so poor, and that I'd never be that way to my own family, only to find myself in my own severe alcoholism situation. I blamed my mom and dad for being alcoholics, and what a childhood me considered bad parents. Then I promptly followed in their addictive footsteps to avoid feeling pain, and blamed them for those addictions. The bullshit machine looks to feed programs that allow us to continue to lie to ourselves to gain pity from our story, while simultaneously allowing us to do the exact thing we're complaining about. The bullshit machine made me believe I was getting love and connection from the pity it was seeking from others, when it was really sabotaging connections and bringing heaviness to the present moment. I told my story in so many different ways that made it impenetrable, so nobody could get in to show me a way out of it. If you did find a hole in it, I would just fill it with more bullshit and tell you, you just don't know how it is. Talk to anyone defending their story, and you'll see a similar pattern of hole filling and exclamations like, you don't know how it is. All of this to gain allies against my past story, so I could go on living like I had something to overcome. By the time I finally quit drinking, I was having seizures from the withdrawals, experienced delirium tremens, the rapid onset of confusion linked with lack of REM sleep due to alcoholism, on multiple occasions, and had been to alcohol detox at least 10 times in my life. Some of this can be hard to keep track of. One time, I had a seizure alone in my apartment, where I woke up on the floor with my tongue stuck to my teeth and the roof of my mouth. This was caused by the blood that dried after I bit my tongue during the seizure. Did I go to the hospital that day? Nope. I was too conflicted. On one hand, I was too ashamed and embarrassed at my state of being, but on the other hand, something was also telling me that it was a great pity story to tell someone in the future, so maybe I should go. You do not think clearly when you're under the vibration and sensations of anxiety, especially when you've spent your life avoiding it with addictions. That night taught me an awful lot about the truth of who I am and the infinite amount of directions I could choose to go in this life experience, because I surrendered the will I was using to hold up the bullshit stories I'd been telling myself to the universe. It started me on the journey that I find myself on now, writing this book in a healthy body and living for myself, my callings, and what aligns for me and my family. It was an awakening evening that left my eyes wide open about who I had been and who I can be, as long as I still wanted to be on this planet. I have used that night as permission to climb out of the story I had been telling myself about victimhood, anxiety, addiction, and feeling sorry for myself, and gave up the part of myself that needed to be perfect to make up for all those things I believed were wrong with me. It's been a launch pad for taking massive amounts of action for myself, sometimes in the form of non-action, so please don't confuse massive amounts of action with something that is hard to do. Love and creativity in action is natural and easy. The massive action required in learning who we really are underneath the bullshit requires a lot of silence and doing nothing in meditation, but I never would have known that. And I definitely would have never been on board with that if it weren't for that night. I saw something different in that mirror. I saw through something. A lie. It was me, but not me. I knew and know that I am far more than I can ever imagine with the frontal lobe I was given, and so are you. Right now, look around at where you are, and what you have, because all of it is nothing without you, not the other way around. If you don't like what you see, then you're looking through the very specific lens of your story, and the information in this book can help open your eyes to that, but it can't do it for you. You are your purpose, and your perception of who you are is your story. The question you'll answer by the end of the book will be which one is worth living, your purpose or your story. Neither one of them is the wrong path, but one of them is a lie. Before you go to the next chapter, try sitting in front of the mirror for 15 minutes and see how you feel. Don't judge yourself, just sit. Look into your eyes, connect, and love that fact that you exist in front of the mirror for a while. Just remember to breathe easy. What's going to happen, Neil? How am I supposed to know? Sit down in front of the mirror and see what happens. You already know what can happen if I do it, so find out what happens when you do it. All you're doing is connecting with the thing that is beating your heart while looking into the eyes of its creation. Anything can happen. Sit and fall in love with yourself. Take more than 15 minutes if you need to. The next chapter isn't going anywhere.